Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing an extended series about the application of biblical stories, and we're going to look at an orphan who became very influential and how her influence ends up changing the fate of a nation. And so you hear her and you hear influence. And if you can see my emojis, you know that there's a queen on the emojis. So who are we talking about? Well, you have to be talking about Esther, right? She's the orphan queen that was influential for the children of Israel. So let's look at Esther, and we're going to be in Esther, the 5th chapter. And we're going to skip through to Esther, the 5th chapter, because I'm going to paraphrase a bit of what the story of Esther is and why it's pivotal to what we're talking about. So, in a nutshell, King Xerxes, who's the king of Persia, decides that he's going to get rid of the wife that he has and get a new wife. They have a conflict, interaction. We won't get into that, but you should read it in Esther chapter 1. So they have an issue, and the king decides, I'm going to get rid of this queen and get another queen. And now he goes and he finds all of the eligible bachelorettes, right, from his kingdom, and he calls them forth to be possible suitors, right? I don't know what the female term for a suitor is, but I think it's still a suitor. So possible suitors for him. And so he's going to choose between these women. Now, it's pretty clearly understood that if they didn't become the queen, they still would be concubines or part of his harem. So he would just have a whole lot of women that he had access to, which he probably already had some women that he had access to, but he wants to replace this queen. And so he's bringing in all these women. Now they're virgins, and they're brought in, and they go through a whole cleansing ceremony and purification and all this kind of stuff according to the rituals or the practices of the Persian culture at this time. And all of that is okay, but who becomes really important is who the namesake of the book of Esther is Esther. Esther is her Persian name. Her Jewish name is Hadassah. And she comes in and is one of the women that's chosen to be a part of this process. Now, it's interesting because she's an orphan being raised by her uncle, but she's also a Jew that's in the province of Persia, in this region of Persia. And her uncle, Mordecai, is a person who works in the city gate, or at the kingdom, like he's one of the appointed like courtiers or so, and advisors or council people for the king. Okay. And so he's already aware of kind of what's going to happen. So he gives Esther some good advice when she goes in. He tells her, you know what, don't mention the fact that you're a Jew. Don't tell anybody about that or your heritage. Keep that private, because even though I've taught you about your heritage and I want you to be proud of it, there are some people who are not going to be as excited about welcoming you as a Jew as you might think. So she takes his advice, she listens to what he says, and she moves forward, and she finds favor with the king, and she advances to a place of favor. At the same time, what rises up is an enemy of the Jews, and his name is Haman. He is plotting against the Jews and wants to have a day of destruction. When Mordecai hears of this day of destruction in which Haman is plotted to kill all the Jews and take their land, he's like, in their possessions, he is mourning. And so we step in that in Esther, the 5th chapter. He's mourning. Mordecai's at the king's gates, and he's ripping his clothes, and he's mourning, and he's sad. And when Esther hears about that by way of her servants, now she's Queen Esther, right? She hears about that by way of her servants. She goes to sing clothes to Mordecai, and Mordecai refuses to be comforted. Instead, he sends a message back of why he's doing what he's doing. And so he comes back, and we're in Esther 5 verse 9. It says, so Hathach, which is Esther's servant, came back and told Esther everything that Mordecai had said. He says, Esther talked it over with Hathach and then sent him back to Mordecai with this message. So basically Mordecai says to Esther by way of her servant, listen, they want to kill us all. They want to take our land. You got to do something to prevent this because you're the queen. And so the message that Esther sends back is this: everyone who works for the king here, and even the people out in the provinces, know that there is a single fate for every man or woman who approaches the king without being invited: death. The one exception is if the king extends the gold scepter, and then he or she may live. And it's been 30 days now since I've been invited to come to the king. So it doesn't matter, according to this culture, it doesn't matter if she's the queen or not. If she's not invited by the king, she doesn't go and she doesn't get to talk to the king. So then when Hathach told her, Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai sent her this message. He says, don't think that just because you live in the king's house, you're the one Jew who will get out of this alive. If you persist in staying silent at a time like this, help and deliverance will arrive for the Jews from someplace else. But you and your family will be wiped out. Who knows? Maybe you were made queen for just such a time as this. Okay. Now, remember, I'm reading from the Message paraphrase. So basically, they have this dialogue back and forth. He's like, listen, I need you to do something. We're all going to get killed. She's like, I can't do it because I'm going to get killed if I go and approach him. He hasn't asked for me and it ain't happening. He comes back like, oh, okay, so I see what you're doing. You don't want to take a risk. But you know what? God is going to deliver us because we're his chosen people. So he's going to get us. He's going to deliver us no matter what. You don't even know if maybe this is the reason why you became queen from the beginning. Now, I want to read one more set of passages in which she tells, Esther answers back, okay? So she sent back this answer to Mordecai. She says, go and get all the Jews living in Susa together. Fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, either day or night. I and my maids will fast with you. If you will do this, I will go to the king, and even though it's forbidden, if I die, I die. Okay. So she's willing to go, and Mordecai keeps her instructions. So she says, you know what? Okay. All right. You might be right about this. Let me go ahead and fast. So here goes the application that I want us to get from this part of the story of Esther. And I'll tell you just as a spoiler alert, things work out well. She ends up saving her people, and Haman, who is the one that plots against the Jews, ends up dying on his own gallows. So it works out, but it's at the point of decision that we kind of need to really focus in on the book of Esther. And some people think, oh, well, this is application just for women. It's like a women's empowerment chapter of the book or something like that. It's not actually. It's about influence, and it's about what we choose to do with our influence, right? She's gone from being an orphan, right, to being a queen. And she's gone from no influence, essentially, to being one of the more influential people in the whole kingdom of Persia, which is extremely influential, okay? And she finds favor with the king, but she doesn't know that she's going to find favor with the king. So she has to take a risk on putting herself in a vulnerable position in order to do what it is that's being called of her. Her husband, the king, doesn't have to receive her, and that's the point, okay? So what she does is interesting. When it's time for us to use our influence, what do we do? Sometimes we are faced with something controversial, something that we know should be changed or something should be different. And we are sitting here with a place of influence towards other people, and we don't necessarily use our influence for what we know it should be used for. And maybe we're like Esther. Maybe we're concerned that, oh no, you know what, this is not going to work out for me. This could be dangerous for me. This could be harmful for me. But I want to ask you to think about if an orphan queen who had really no ability to even control the dynamics of what's going on, despite her influence, can take a risk, can you take a risk too? What are you using your influence for, or should you be using your influence for, that you know is the right thing to be doing, and you're not doing it because of fear of man, or because of fear of the circumstances not working out in your good? Maybe fear that you're going to lose your influence or your position. It doesn't really matter if it's the place of a kingdom or a place of a family. If you're a parent and you know your child is doing something they shouldn't do, but you're more interested in pleasing your child than showing them the right way, that's a misuse of influence, right? And it happens all the time, right? I work with families all the time, and sometimes they're like, well, I knew this was the wrong thing for them to be doing. Well, I knew they shouldn't be involved in this, but I didn't want to hurt their feelings, or I didn't want to bring them into a controversial position, or I didn't want to say something that might be disagreeable. Here goes the thing. If you're put in a position of influence, it's for a reason. Don't forsake the reason that you've been put in the position you're put in. Do what you need to do with that position. Find yourself using your influence for appropriate things, because after all, everybody doesn't get the same influence that you have, right? We talk about spheres of influence and ways that we can reach people. If you've been given an opportunity to reach someone, you should use that opportunity to do the best work that you can. Not take the chance to just say, well, I don't want to displease my constituents, right? I don't want anybody to be unhappy with the decisions that I'm making. I don't want anybody to feel put out in this area. Listen, sometimes you have to ruffle a little bit of feathers, not with the intentions of ruffling feathers, but with the intentions of doing what you know is right within the sphere of influence that you do have. Something that we have to think about. And then secondly, what Esther does is really impactful here as well, because she decides, okay, yes, I'm going to use my sphere of influence to try to save these people. And after she makes that decision, she goes to a higher king than her husband. She goes to God. And she says to God, you know what? You're the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We're going to fast. We're going to pray. And we're going to believe that your influence will be greater than my husband's influence. That's such a big deal, because he's like, look, I don't know how to save these people. I don't know if my influence alone is enough. I don't know if his love for me is enough, but I know that I can reach you. And if I reach you, I'm going to hope that you're going to reach out for us. God does answer Esther's prayers. He responds to her call for him, and he does save the people that are about to face death in this situation. As a matter of fact, the whole situation is turned around. He gives Esther a good strategy, and the strategy does work. It's successful. And so maybe he'll do the same thing for you, but there's no way to know unless you stretch your influence right in the right directions. You know what directions that is. And if you don't, you need to pray and ask for some guidance, ask for direction. But when you know you have the power to do something and you do not do it, that's something peculiar, something we want to think about. And these are the applications of an orphan queen. And so we are going to continue with our devotional series tomorrow. So I look forward to kind of having another approach, another story to look at. Until then, please read the book of Esther. It's quite short, actually, and enjoy and be blessed. We're praying for you. We hope that you're praying for us.